The Knights of Columbus have a very famous saying. You've probably heard of it. Tempus fugit memento mori. Time flies, remember death. A creed that was coined to remind us that we have but a short time on this earth to prove ourselves worthy of eternal life. While trying desperately to avoid thinking about the underlying tradcath bigotry of the organisation itself, I've had this motto stuck in my head recently. Time flies, remember death might as well be the slogan of my workplace, in which days explode by and the things that determine mortal outcomes are often measured in minutes. I rarely find myself with a moment to be still and reconcile my own standing with living, and yet I find myself asking a pertinent question. What is the opposite of all this? What is the life lived that finds itself stretching every incorporeal instance out into infinity, beyond boredom, beyond tedium, the truest and most tormented vision of existence, the explicit agony of waiting? You know what I mean, don't you? Those malevolent moments that have you cornered in limbo, gathering all but your thoughts to dust. We've all clock-watched, even though we know it to be a foolish endeavour. Front row to our own torture, we find ourselves at the mercy of a creature that does not wish to be perceived. More than just a ticking clock, time is an unrelenting entropic monster. It ages you. It returns all things to the soil, and while it may well be a flat circle, it also seems to decide its own rate of momentum, speeding you through all your joys and making you linger in those moments most painful. To wait is to know every horror of this universe in full, a lifetime of existence measured in the size of a pinhead, the entirety of the world and all who reside within it, reduced to a narrow view of just a single perspective, where anticipation and motivation are so often weapons to be turned against you. Sounds like a bad idea to build a game around, right? And yet someone did. And it turned out to be a fascinatingly lonely rumination on the nature of existence, time, and the power of perception. The Longing is a game all about waiting. In it, you play a lonely shade whose only task is to wake up your king in 400 days. That's 400 real days. At the time of writing, I am currently set to finish the game on the 28th of August 2024, and there's not a lot you can do while you wait. You have an armchair to sit in, a few books to read, that's about it. Enveloped by what seems like an infinite corridor of inaction, those restless legs get to work almost immediately, delivering to the player a perfect microcosm of this peculiar form of torture. Were this all there is to The Longing, I would suspect many would chuckle at the brash novelty of such a thing, but not really engage with what it's trying to do. This isn't just some minimalist interpretation of idle games. There are things going on that can only be reconciled with by ignoring your primary directive to sit idle and wait for the right time to perform your one task. Set in the labyrinthine subterranean halls of a once magnificent kingdom now condemned to ruin, and with nothing but time on your hands, you begin to explore. A plodding and methodical affair, traversal is an agony unto itself. Decisions have to be made well in advance, and the number of branching paths made available to you from the start can become quite overwhelming. It is far too easy to waste time on some disappointment or other, and the generous allowance you have makes for a very weak salve for this festering wound. Eventually, you run out of options, and find yourself back at square one. Sat listless in thrall of the cosmic echoes of the absence of everything, your mind slowly begins to rot. This infinite temporal expanse is too much. If anything, a perfect antithesis to the way that time is usually presented in games, where there is much to do and little time to do it in. Those echoes get louder and louder the more time you spend in this wretched place. But while time may well be your enemy, it also is your greatest ally. The world you inhabit exists by the same rules as you, subject to the same entropic glare, and as such, its obstacles to further exploration are far from infallible. Some gaps may be too large to leap when you first encounter them, some outcrops too tall to climb, but with time, the solution will often present itself. Progress is determined mostly by a willingness to wait. If patience is a virtue, by the time you complete this game, you will have ascended to sainthood. Your avatar The lonely shade will sometimes give you clues along the way that encourage you further. Maybe come back in a few weeks and see if this stalactite comes loose. Another month or so and that bed of moss will be bountiful enough to break your fall. Other times you have to put 2 and 2 together yourself, having an awareness of the weight of your own body on certain surfaces and how the things that grow out in the dark interact with one another. There's plenty of time to experiment, don't you worry. Perhaps a novelty at first. The idea of waiting a full month for a pool of water to fill is an inherently funny solution to a puzzle, but it's not a solution presented in isolation, and its relationship to the wider game is where things get even more interesting, because, as it turns out, the longing is not actually in real time at all. As you explore these dank caves and echoed hallways, you'll find items to bring back to your hovel, coal to stoke a fire, books to add to your collection, different coloured chalks and scraps of paper you can use to create masterful drawings to adorn your walls. Assorted furniture and decorations can eventually be built or sought to cut short the implicit hostility of your prison-like existence. As you start to fill the homestead with colour, with light and warmth, you begin to notice that the timer at the top of the screen is, well, skipping. Time itself is moving on at a quicker rate, the countdown dropping in larger increments, but only in this one room. Leaving to go explore returns the timer to its original state, but this dilation is felt in other places too. In some spaces, removed from the context of your surroundings, time stops altogether. It took me a while to come to terms with what this actually meant. As a means of encouraging exploration and getting the player to actively engage with a game that on paper doesn't really want to be played, it's a rather clever bait and switch. It's not a cheat code to skip right to the end, however. I think at its fastest the game would still take a full 4 months to reach the end of the timer, but as you quickly realise, that's not the only way to complete the game. Part of what makes The Longing more than just its fascinating central idea is that it presents a uniquely complex relationship between the player and the shade. If the game isn't actually in real time, it means that you aren't really playing it from your own perspective, and often is the case that the shade will go off and do things on their own, even with the game switched off. In that same breath, however, no progress can be made without player input, unless you count sitting and waiting until the 400 days are up. I can't tell if this is ludonarrative dissonance or not. It's so intentional a design choice that its peculiarities inherently must also be by design. But in that same breath, does the game recognize the autonomy of these two characters, the shade and the player, or are we intended to be one and the same? If time really is a matter of perspective, then does this make The Longing a first-person game? The thing about The Longing is that, well, it's perhaps the most exciting idea in a game I've come across in years, and at the same time it's almost unbearable to play. It really challenges your patience in a way no other game does. The slow crawl it takes to get from A to B, the days, weeks even, when you can do nothing but collect coal and read the same few books you own. It's very clear as you navigate the tunnels and inclines of this underground realm that there is something awaiting you the higher you climb, and with enough time and enough patience, perhaps you might find an answer to that burning question: is this all there is to my life? What I can tell you is that long before I reached the credits, this game tested my willingness to not take the easy path. It challenged my resolve and my ability to simply sit and wait for things to happen. The slowest endurance test of all time, The Longing is a leap of faith. A call to take the world as it comes and recognize that even in our most powerless moments, we still have a choice. It's a potent, beautiful, profoundly weird game, and I hope in some way I've convinced you to try it out. Thank you for watching.